Hi, I'm Jessica Switzer Green. I'm the founder of JG Switzer. I started my wild wool experiment 3 years ago in 2018. Good morning. Every morning begins here at the JG Switzer workshop with a little muscle. We have 2,000 square feet in this beautiful studio space, and we thought we'd show you around and let's start making something. It all begins with this baby right here. This is Luna. She's our 7.5 ton, 10,000 needle loom, and she's an old industrial upholstery machine that is a needle punch machine that felts fabric. We've repurposed her and we use her now to do dry felting, it's called, and make all kinds of incredible, crazy wool creations and new types of fabric. So I'm working on this piece right here. It's a mosaic piece where we've taken pre-felted pieces and we're putting them down on a really wonderful Shetland wool. We work with a lot of wool that is either on the Conservancy's list of what would be at-risk animals, and these are little Shetland sheep. They're on the list because they're endangered domestic breeds, so we like to work with small farmers, figure out how we can incorporate their wool into a lot of our pieces. And the Shetlands are endangered only because they're small. They're not like the big, fat, fluffy, fine fiber merinos, but they have this incredible, slightly coarser wool, but not too coarse, that felts extremely well. So we use it a lot. So I just begin with like laying down lots of little pieces. And most of the layout of the wool starts with a very sharp object. So I've had to train myself to keep my hands out of the process. Sometimes I'll literally like put them behind my back because our fingers are important. Typically I'll run something through maybe 3 or 4 different times. All right, so we've got a finished piece coming out. So the input side of the felting process is to start with a canvas. So this is actually a huge roll of Perendale that comes from within a 100-mile radius of our workshop. So we're really happy to work with the local fiber shed and within the local fiber shed to source our wool. The canvas is the beginning of it, and then we use a combination of wild fleeces. So here's a Gotland. Gotlands are my favorite because they come in this really extraordinary gray. And we peel apart kind of each different fleece, really get to know it, and then lay it down on the canvas. That's one fabric line, Gotland Gray. Another fabric line is made from Shetland. So we really like to promote really an economy for those sheep farmers. I met Homan and Elena, and Homan Rajai is the founder of Studio Ahead, at an event that I did at Anthem in San Francisco. And it was just hilarious because Homan was terrified of sheep, and guess what I brought to the event? 2 live Shetland sheep, just to show the source of the natural fibers that our fabrics come from, back down to the animal. And he wouldn't even hold it at first. And then once Homan started touching this adorable baby lamb, he became more and more interested in wool. And Elena being Russian, Russians just have wool in their soul. Homan and Elena came up to the JG Switzer workshop and we just had a blast. It was like a play date. Worked on a lot of different fabrics, and they really began to kind of understand the felting process. This is the result. 2 years later, Elena and Homan designed this piece. It's called Sheep Tapestry, and it's really just been fun to work on. Sheep tapestry has these organic forms that are created by putting down a pattern that Elena developed that we follow, sew them onto the piece. I'm gonna miss it when it goes. We've developed all these different fabric pathways using all kinds of, maybe over a dozen sheep. And this one is abstract. It's a way of taking pre-felted cut pieces and laying them down and running them through a flat felting technique, and it ends up turning into a really one-of-a-kind fabric. So every piece is unique because it's a completely controlled randomness. Another kind of fabric pathway is water stones. This is this really fun floor cushion pattern. I just wanted something quieter that I could work on meditating on the floor and just get cozier at home, so water stones came out of that. Another kind of fabric that we have at JG Switzer are taking silk. So we'll work in different kinds of sheep, but we'll also work in other materials. This is a silk glaze on this piece. So it's a 30% silk on each piece. And it creates kind of like the starlight effect on the wool, which is really fun. And then we have the Gotland fabric. This was the raw Gotland. Darren and Jay at Coup d'Etat put this on a chair that's just gorgeous. Fell in love with it, and we're some of our very early fans of JG Switzer, so shout out to Coup d'Etat. We just incorporate it here as sort of an abstract Luna Moon image. We do different fabrics and mat experimentations with wool. It's kind of like a wool laboratory. So there's all kinds of things that we can felt in, and we're really just beginning. I'm starting to experiment with alpaca and other types of fiber. Well, Sonoma County is just filled with winemakers and brew pubs, and a winemaker client, I call him El Patron. He buys some of our wall art and has filled his house with it. And his name is Jason Rupert at Adura Wines. And he commissioned 3 pieces of our wall art, and he and I have worked together to help make them fit into his home and who he is. I grew up in the wilds, in the middle of National Forest in Southern Oregon. As I got into the next chapter of life, I started feeling like with my husband and I, we were really looking for a more return to nature, return to a more rural lifestyle. And I've always had this connection with animals and the land. And so we got sheep, and then that means we've got wool. And that means we've got to do something with the wool. I'm just obsessed with wool. I mean, the extraordinary benefits of wool is really a rediscovery that goes deep into our kind of our ancestry and our, I think, nomadic genes and the way we respond to sheep. Wool is antimicrobial, it's antibacterial, it's a natural flame retardant, and it's also has a wicking quality to the fibers and releases it into the atmosphere through a process called absorption. And in doing so, it releases energy. I feel like we get a little feel for that energy every time we're interacting with wool. Life gives you these little breadcrumbs, and pursuing my little breadcrumbs has been always closely aligned with nature. But then I noticed that if you follow a path and you don't always know where it's going, but you just trust in that journey, it'll lead you to the most extraordinary places.